Okay, look at that. We have another video game hacking talk. This one's great. Give it up for Paul DeCaro.
Good evening, CodeMash. My name is Paul DiCarlo. I'm also from the state of Texas, and I'm also going to be talking about video game hacking. Now, we're going to flash forward a little bit. We're going to talk about the state of console hacking in 2017. And when I talk about this, I'm looking very specifically at how we can run unsigned code on video game consoles that are currently for sale in various marketplaces. So if you look at the state of Homebrew today, AKA, can a device run Hello World, unsigned code on the device? There are various different ways to do this on some of the popular platforms. For example, your PlayStation 4 can do this through a firmware 176 browser exploit. No longer good. Xbox One, Microsoft decided to be really awesome and release the Universal Windows platform. Simply write Hello World, deploy it to your Xbox, deploy it to your HoloLens, deploy it to your Windows machine, doesn't matter. It's going to run. If you look at Wii U, they've got a browser-based exploit. PlayStation Vita, browser-based exploit. Nintendo 3DS, originally browser-based exploit, and now we're looking at stuff that focuses on the system firmware itself. So you might wonder, why so many browser-based exploits? The answer to this is very, very simple. All console browsers, with the exception of the Xbox One, rely on WebKit. And if you weren't familiar, WebKit is open source. So, want to run unsigned code? Want to be a hacker? Look at the source code of your browser, WebKit, and you can go ahead and craft entry points that way. So why so many exploits on the Nintendo 3DS? The first thing is someone decided to connect an FPGA up to a device and physically access the firmware, dump it, and decrypt it. Now, how does this get you to running unsigned code? Well, there is a path, and this is a common path whenever you're going to exploit any sort of piece of hardware. You would first want to try to go for a firmware exploit, and in this case, that was the first thing that happened. Once you have that, you can analyze that firmware in something like IDA Pro, and you can see exactly where the syscalls are being called, and you can look at memory access exploits once you've got yourself a running firmware exploit. With access to memory, you can look at ways to create new entry points based on games that you're putting inside the console, doing things like buffer overflow attacks and that sort of thing. Now, the current state of buffer overflows is really hard to exploit due to memory access protections that are implemented in various operating systems. So what they'll look at doing is ways to get around this using things called return-oriented programming. This is a really, really hot topic in the exploit scene. It's really cool to look at because you really can't do anything about it. And so if you look at the current state of getting Homebrew to execute on a Nintendo 3DS console, they actually went all the way down to looking at pre-installed software on these consoles, so the sound player on this device. A kid out of Carnegie Mellon decided to create a crafted M4A file that, regardless of firmware, will drop you into an executable shell, allow you to execute code. Of course, you have to chain this up with a little bit of stuff that was messed up in Nintendo's implementation, using GPU to allow arbitrary memory writes and that sort of thing. And it gets really ugly when you look at what happens underneath here. You can even get custom firmwares by exploiting various different ARM processors that are employed in the security implementation on the Nintendo 3DS. I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but do understand ARM 9 is a processor that's used exclusively for user mode access. ARM 11 is used exclusively for the very, very, very precious kernel and syscalls that are available on the system. So what's cool is when these things come out, these things called scenes form. Okay? And scenes, whenever there's like a viable platform, you've got a great entry point, you get a whole Homebrew community that starts to pop up. And these scenes are where the work sort of happens around the community. What's interesting is you'll see that these things have evolved as technologies evolve. So typically you would see a lot of the hackers would meet in IRC chat rooms and take their findings and post them to wikis. This has now moved to Discord, where they'll then publish their findings publicly onto GitHub. They'll still have wikis, and then they'll usually post relevant news in those communities to popular subreddits. So what this looks like, and it's not a few people here. It's actually, if you look at the 3DS hacking Discord chat, I took a snapshot of this shortly before making this deck today, 1,982 active users online that are looking at stuff that's coming out there. Similarly, you can see Ned Williams' sound hacks repo on GitHub. This is the M4A exploit that I had mentioned earlier. And also, there's a really popular subreddit with 33,000 subscribers right now, where it's usually people that are looking for this information. Do beware, some of these scenes get tainted by piracy and that sort of thing, so we're just talking about how we might execute Hello World. So you might be wondering, all right, I've got access on a console, how do I do that? Well, there's a nice tool chain available called DevKit Pro. You just go download this, build it, and it's going to give you a tool chain that will allow you to simply write some C code, choose your target platform, get your shell access, and execute. So the conclusion, why would you want this? Well, Homebrew execution allows interesting things like running Quake on a Nintendo 3DS. You're not supposed to do that. Also, being able to do complex computation on game console hardware. You may have heard about folding at home, solving the protein folding issue on the original PlayStation 3. And if you want to learn more about this, I'm telling you, the best book I have ever read on this subject, and it talks about hacking the original Xbox, is by Bunny Huang. It's called Hacking the Xbox, An Introduction to Reverse Engineering, about 20 bucks. It is the most exciting tale of how code execution was achieved on the Xbox platform. I'm Paul DiCarlo. I'll see you guys tomorrow at CodeMash.
All right, I love that the Xbox browser is the only one that didn't get hacked. I think it's the first time that a Microsoft browser is the best one. Oh, zing. Sorry, Microsoft people.